Hello, I'm trying to record this lecture on Tennyson's Ulysses. This is 12th of May 2020, and although this isn't the best situation to study a poem like Ulysses, I'll still try to do some justice to this poem as far as I can. So, with that, let's begin. Now, before I go directly to the text of Tennyson's Ulysses, I want to discuss a bit about the character of Ulysses and the backgrounds from which Tennyson derives this character. And with that, I'll discuss both the Homeric and the Dantesque backgrounds from where Tennyson gets influence to write a character like Ulysses sitting in the Victorian era. So the first one is about Homer's Odysseus, which is the Greek of Ulysses. Ulysses is a Latin word, the Greek one is Odysseus. And we find this character in Homer's Iliad. And Iliad is about the adventures of the hero in its final stages of the Trojan War and the fall of Troy. And in Iliad, you have also Achilles, who is the hero of Homer's Iliad, and also Ulysses, who was the Greek commander in the Trojan War. And there's a sequel to Iliad, which is called the Odyssey. And Odyssey is written exclusively about Ulysses. And Ulysses is the hero of Odyssey. And he's the king of Ithaca. And Odyssey records his journey back home after the Trojan War. So, when it comes to the Homeric tradition, we see Ulysses in these two texts, Iliad and Odyssey. Coming to Dante, there is this Italian work called the Divina Commedia, the Divine Comedy. And the first section of the Divine Comedy is the Inferno. And this is Dante's retelling of the character of Ulysses, and there the character is called Ulisse, which is the Italian. And Dante's retelling actually records is a fictional work, obviously. It's about the 9 concentric circles of hell, which the sinners have to pass, and Dante himself is passing through the Inferno before he reaches heaven. And these circles of hell is for recognition and rejection of everyone's sins. And everyone has to pass through these circles of hell before they reach heaven. And Ulysses, who is Ulisse in Dante's Divina Commedia, he is condemned to hell among the counselors of fraud. And this is because for his pursuit of knowledge beyond the human bounds, and also for creating the deception of the Trojan horse. As you know, in the final stages of Iliad, the Trojans, the Greeks win the war by inserting a Trojan horse, which the Trojans interpret as being a symbol of peace and surrender. And they take in the horse in a heavily guarded Troy. And once the horse is in the depth of the night, they realize that in the wooden Trojan horse, the wooden horse was actually hollow, and the best soldiers in the Greek side were in the Trojan horse, and they come out in the depth of night, and Troy falls. So this is, although everything is fair in war, and this deception actually brings about the victory of the Greeks in the Trojan War. But still, this is deception which was committed by Ulysses in his life, and so Dante places him in one of the 9 concentric circles of hell because he has performed this act of deception. And he is also placed in hell because he pursues knowledge beyond the human bounds. And this part is heavily reflected in Tennyson's Ulysses as well. So these two traditions of both the Homeric tradition and the Dantesque tradition actually serves as inspiration or source of Tennyson's Ulysses. The next thing which I have to discuss is the concept of the dramatic monologue. Now, all the 3 poems that you have in CC10 in this part, Tennyson's Ulysses, My Last Duchess by Robert Browning, and also Matthew Arnold's Dover Beach. All the 3 poems are actually dramatic monologues, and this is a very distinctive type of poetry, and it has some very specific features, having which a poem qualifies to be a dramatic monologue. Ulysses and all the 3 poems rather are very good examples of dramatic monologue. Now, these are the characters which make the dramatic monologue. It is usually a very long speech or a narrative. As you know, it's quite long. It's not very short. All the poems. It is spoken. This monologue, this speech, it is spoken by a single person who is not a poet, and the speech is at a critical moment or a specific situation. This person speaks at a critical moment in his life and a very specific situation in his life. And this speech is the one which makes the whole of the poem. And there is nothing else except this speech in the poem. The second quality or character is that this single speaker, who is the one person speaking this narrative, he addresses or interacts with one or more people throughout the course of the dramatic monologue. He addresses and interacts with people who do not speak. The other people, we feel their presence, but they do not speak. But we can only assume that presence of other people from their speech, from the speech of the single speaker. Like when he addresses someone, we know that the other person is present, but the other person doesn't speak. We only know some other person is present because this main speaker addresses that person. The third quality is that through this monologue, through this speech, the poet, and you have to remember that the poet is not the single person speaker, the poet is different. And through this monologue, through the speech, the poet, he desires to reveal the character or the temperament of the single speaker. And this desire to expose, rather, the character or the temperament of this single speaker who only speaks throughout the poem, this desire influences the poet's choice of words and expressions. The poet uses his words and expressions through which he makes the poem, he constructs the poem, and he uses these words and expressions in a way that will reveal, that will expose the character or the temperament of this one single speaker. A dramatic monologue has to have these 3 characteristics or these 3 traits which makes it qualify as a dramatic monologue. Now we discuss about Tennyson's Ulysses and what happens in Tennyson's Ulysses. As you must have known if you have read the text that Tennyson situates Ulysses in his old age, and it has been quite a long time that he has returned from the Trojan War, and obviously it has taken him very long to complete the journey back home to Ithaca. And Tennyson situates Ulysses in a moment, that critical moment, where Ulysses isn't satisfied with the life he has after coming back from the Trojan War, after all the difficulties he had at sea while his journey back home from the Trojan War. Now he is restless again, and he is not at all satisfied with the life he has. And he wants to go back into that life of activity. So, Tennyson's Ulysses as a whole is a symbol of that heroic spirit which Homer's Ulysses in Iliad had. And Tennyson situates this Ulysses in this particular state of mind where he actually wants to go back to that life of activity and heroism that he once had. Tennyson's Ulysses wants to explore experience. For him, this exploring of experience is what makes his life. A life of inactivity, a life of rest in his home in Ithaca is not the life he longs for, he wishes for. Tennyson's Ulysses wants to go further than what his age allows and opportunity allows, and he is determined to endure suffering, and he will take that suffering if it comes, but he is willing to pay that price for his life of heroic activity. Tennyson's Ulysses wants to defy age and death. Age and death are two things which doesn't really stop Ulysses from going on again in that life of activity and progress. We see Ulysses in a moment when he wants to shake off the responsibilities of family and kingdom. Now, this is one point, if you have noticed, that I also discussed while I was discussing the background, that responsibility of a family, a man's responsibility to a family, was actually very important in the Victorian age. Ulysses wants to shake off the responsibilities of the family and also the kingdom of Ithaca which he rules. He has a very fond remembrance of his glorious past, the heroic past which he once lived, and he also keeps on reminding everyone about that glorious past and spur them to accomplish these acts of heroism in the face of greatest odds. Now, Ulysses had always lived this life, accomplishment of these acts of heroism in the face of the odds. And even in this age, while Tennyson situates him in an age where he is old, he still wants to continue with that experience. And last but not the least, he has a desire to reunite with Achilles. Achilles is, as you know, I've told in the previous slide, was the hero of Homer's Iliad. And Achilles was killed in Homer's Iliad. So he is now in his heaven, and through Ulysses' adventure and a probable death, Ulysses wants to reunite with this friend Achilles. So, with that as an introduction, let's move on to the main text. It little profits that an idle king by the still hearth among these barren crags, matched with an aged wife, I meet and dole unequal laws unto a savage race that hoard and sleep and feed and know not me. So he says it little profits, and he is weighing the two sides of his family life which he is forced to take on after his return from the battle. And he says that it is of no profit that I sit here. And this word profit says that Ulysses is measuring family and relationships, his own family and his relationships with the kingdom which he rules by a commercial scale. The word profit tells us that he is measuring these family and relationships by a commercial scale. And this is the effect of the Victorian industrial environment, which takes on the poem from the very first line. So it little profits Ulysses, it is hardly any profit of Ulysses to stay in this still hearth. And idle king, of course, refers to Ulysses, who is the king of Ithaca and who has returned home after the fall of Troy. And he's idle, and idle is a state which doesn't suit Ulysses. And idle is also not the state which suits the Victorian temper. Both Ulysses and the contemporary Victorian temper, where Tennyson writes this poem, is about activity. It is about zeal. It is about progress. It is never about being idle. So it is no profit to Ulysses to sit idle by the still hearth. Hearth is the floor of a fireplace, and this is a symbol for warm domesticity and familiarity. Home is a place where you experience this feeling of fond domesticity, where things are familiar with you. But domesticity and familiarity and family is something which is very unwanted when it comes to Ulysses. Ulysses wants adventure, he wants uncertainty, he wants to explore the new. Sitting at home idle in some kind of a warm domesticity, although it looks pleasant for anyone else, it is unwanted for Ulysses. By the still hearth and barren crags refers to the rocky island of Ithaca, and Ulysses calls it barren and stagnant, this island which he himself is the king. He calls it barren and stagnant because there is no opportunity for adventure in this barren land. Matched with an aged wife. In first reading, matched refers to marriage. The word matched, and while reading this poem, while reading Tennyson, you have to consider every word as if, because every word has its own weight, and that is how Tennyson writes. And every word as if has layers of meaning. Matched is one such word, like profit. In first reading, it refers to marriage. But when you select the word matched without selecting the word marriage, matched is a word that lacks the sentiment of marriage. It is only, Ulysses is only formally married to his wife, and it is a very harsh, if you say matched with the wife, it lacks the sentiment of marriage, and it is a very harsh and insensitive way of looking at a marriage. And that is exactly the Victorian temper, the Victorian marriage. It said that it was made in heaven, but it lacks the sentimentality, it lacks the sentiment, it lacks the emotion, it lacks love. It is about convenience, it is about class, it is about a performance. The Victorian marriage is not about sentiment. So, this word matched actually reflects that marriage in an insensitive way. And matched with an aged wife, of course, refers to Penelope, who is the wife of Ulysses. What's very important and what's very shocking that he says aged wife, aged first and wife later. So there is a very deep rooted insensitivity and disregard for the identity of Penelope, the disregard for the identity of his wife. And you will notice soon that there is, if we see this poem through the lens of gender, there is a misogynistic undertone that runs through the poem. And aged wife is a kind of dismissal of the identity, dismissal of the relationship of Ulysses with his wife. And it is as if with age, a woman loses her value. A woman is about the consumption, about sexual consumption, and the sexual consumption is better when the woman is young. Because the woman is now old, she could be dismissed by saying aged wife, as if the woman has lost her value with age. I mete and dole unequal laws unto this savage race. Mete and dole unequal laws. Mete and dole, again, very heavy word. It actually means distribute and allocate. And symbolically, it would mean the administration and the governance, which is the common duty of a king. And because Ulysses is the king of Ithaca, it is the duty of Ulysses, this duty of administration and government is on Ulysses. But these two words, mete and dole, there is a pettiness to it. There is an insignificance which is attached with these two words. And as if these common duties of a king is only mete and dole, and it doesn't suit someone who is so heroic, who is so zealous like Ulysses. Unequal laws means meaningless laws, because when a law is unequal, it loses its meaning. So it's kind of an oxymoron. Law is something which is supposed to make everyone equal. And when laws are unequal, the law loses its meaning. And meaningless laws which are made for the common purpose, the common populace. And because this is a monarchy where Ulysses is a king, the laws of a monarchy are never perfect. When it is a monarchy where it is not a democracy, laws doesn't mean anything. The laws of a monarchy are meaningless. Unto a savage race, and Ulysses says that all day I have nothing to do except practice and distribute these laws, these meaningless laws, unto this savage race. And the savage race is the island, refers to the islanders of Ithaca. And these men, these people are Ulysses' real subjects. They are the only subjects Ulysses has, because Ulysses himself is still the king of Ithaca. And he calls his own people savage, means rugged and uncivilized. And understandably, because Ithaca is a small island, compared to cities like Troy. And Ulysses is habituated to seeing people, high class people, like people from Troy. And compared to that, these inhabitants of the small island of Ithaca is nothing. They are savage. But of course, there are other interpretations to this part of the poem, which we'll not discuss in this video. That hoard and sleep and feed and know not me. And they hoard and sleep and feed, and they live a life of eating and sleeping and hoarding. They live, these savage race, they live an uninteresting life of absolute monotony. And their lives, the lives of Ulysses' subjects, the life of a common islander from Ithaca, they are too trivial when it is compared to Ulysses. Ulysses, with his vast experience and vast opportunity and history of adventure, is so much high above his subjects that their lives are too trivial. They live this life of monotony. And they know not me, he says. And these people, they are so ignorant, they are so simple, they are so uncivilized that they are too ignorant even to understand Ulysses' potential. They are not even qualified to understand what Ulysses is. I cannot rest from travel. I will drink life to the lees. Ulysses says that he doesn't want to rest, and he seeks this some kind of continuity to his journey and his adventure. It has been very long since the Battle of Troy, the Trojan War, and it's also been very long from that tumultuous journey back home through the sea from the Battle of Troy. It's been too long since Ulysses have had some action, some adventure. And he says that I cannot rest, I cannot live without adventure, I cannot rest like these. And I will drink life to the lees. And drinking life to the lees means experiencing the extremes of life, the extremes of life's passions to the fullest. He wants to experience life to the fullest. And this life of monotony, of eating and sleeping and spending his days in his home, is not a life that Ulysses desires. And this is also an imagery, drink life to the lees, drink to the lees. This is an imagery of drinking wine till the last drop. All times I have enjoyed greatly, have suffered greatly, both with those that loved me and alone on shore. And when through the scudding drifts the rainy Hades vexed the dim sea. He says, all my life I have enjoyed greatly and have suffered greatly. All my life I have only experienced the extremes. Extremes of enjoyment, extremes of suffering. And Ulysses is required to suffer, such is his character, because the Homeric hero, as Homer portrays it, as I said, that this Tennyson's Ulysses has actually have the reflection of both Homeric tradition and the Dantesque tradition. So this is the Homeric tradition which I'm talking about. The Homeric hero must be all enduring. He must know how to endure suffering, and only then he would be qualified to be the Homeric hero. So Ulysses qualified to be a Homeric hero because he knows he has that quality to suffer. And Ulysses has suffered from misery and hardship both during the Trojan War and also later during his voyage back to Ithaca from the Trojan War. So Ulysses has to his to his career this history of enduring utmost suffering. So he says that I have suffered greatly with those that loved me and alone. Those that loved me are his fellow soldiers when he was fighting in the Trojan War, and also the mariners when he was voyaging back home through the sea, and also alone because he faced many hardships while journeying back through the sea to his homeland Ithaca. One of them was the sea god Poseidon shipwrecking his sea and he getting separated from the rest of his crew. And that is the time he also have suffered alone. So this is a direct reference to both Iliad and Odyssey that Tennyson brings through this mention of Ulysses' suffering. On shore, and when through the scudding drifts, the rainy Hades vexed the dim sea. So on the shore, when during the Trojan War on the battlefield, and also the scudding drifts on the rainy Hades, in the in the turbulent sea when he was coming back to home. This is the reference to the Poseidon thing that I've just said. Scudding drifts, of course, it means the swift water currents, and Hades is a reference from a Greek mythology. It is a constellation which was believed to be responsible for the rains. And when it rains and when there's a storm at sea, the sea is dark and turbulent, and it is vexed, which he says, the vexed, the dim sea. So he refers to this turbulent sea through which he had rowed back to his island of Ithaca. What is important, what is interesting from this part is that Tennyson uses these contrasts, these oppositions. Uh, Enjoyed greatly and suffered greatly are opposites. Enjoyed and suffered. With those that loved me and alone, like in a company and alone, are opposites. On the shore and in the sea, opposites. So these are the opposites or contrast. This is called the antithesis. It is a literary device, it's a rhetorical device in which two opposite ideas are put together in a sentence, and this heightens the contrasting effect. It is used by poets to achieve this contrasting effect. And the best example of this antithesis you'll find in that quote of Charles Dickens, which I said in sorry, not in Hard Times. The tale of the two cities, that it was the best of times, it was the worst of times. That quote which I discussed while doing the literary background, that is the best example of of this antithesis. And this opposites and contrast, which is reflected here by this use of antithesis, it actually reflects the Victorian era, which was full of contrast. And this is one I have discussed in my lecture on the Victorian compromise. So this portion of Tennyson's Ulysses actually also reflects the Victorian compromise, in which is contemporary when Tennyson was writing this poem. I am become a name, and this is one of the best lines of the poem. Ulysses says that I am become a name. So Ulysses is no longer just a person. We have seen the person Ulysses till now who had suffered greatly, who have fought greatly, who has the heroic quality. And this is the height of Ulysses' ego. He says that I am become a name. I am no longer a person now. And he has become as if a synonym for quest, for heroism, for courage, for endurance, for wisdom and fortitude. So the best qualities that can be found in a heroic individual are all present in Ulysses, which makes him synonym for these qualities. So he is no longer just a person, he has become a symbol of these qualities. He is now known worldwide for these qualities. For always roaming with a hungry heart, much have I seen and known cities of men and manners, climates, councils, and governments. So he says, for always roaming with a hungry heart. So Ulysses is habituated with this life of heroism and activity, and he was always roaming with a hungry heart, which symbolizes his eagerness, his zeal, and he wants to push the boundaries. He doesn't want to stop. He doesn't accept that life is over. He just wants to go on with his acts of heroism. And hungry hearts represents that eagerness, that desire, which is a part of Ulysses. Much have I seen and known cities of men and manners, climates, councils, and governments. So this list is intentionally long. It's a long list of men, manners, climates, councils, and governments. It's a long, varied list, which actually is a testimony to the extent of Ulysses' travel, how vast his travel was, how varied his experience. Cities of men, manners, climates, council, governments actually obviously refers to different parts of the world, different varied parts of the world where they had different manners, different cultures, different climates, different politics, different race of men. Obviously this part too also has different a different interpretation, which we'll skip in this video. But in a literal analysis of the poem, this long list refers to the extent of Ulysses' travel. And he says, myself not least, but honored of them all. And wherever Ulysses had gone, Ulysses was welcomed as a great hero. He was honored everywhere that he has been. He says that he has traveled the world, and not only traveled as a commoner, he traveled the world as Ulysses, a king, the great hero. So he was honored wherever he went. All these cities of men and manners and climates. And drunk delight of battle with my peers far on the ringing plains of windy Troy. And he says that I've drunk delight of the battle. I have experienced the thrill of battle. Battle and war. These are something that doesn't repulse Ulysses. He loves the battle. He loves the battlefield. He is habituated in that heroic atmosphere of the battlefield. And the battlefield, the experience of the battle is for Ulysses a very thrilling experience. It's not an experience of cowardice. It's not an experience of anxiety. It's not an experience of fear. It's an experience of thrill for Ulysses. He enjoys the battlefield. And far on the ringing plains of windy Troy. This is, of course, the reference to the Trojan War. And he says the ringing plains of windy Troy, the thunderous sounds of the battlefield, the thunderous sounds of the battlefield, the tremendous chaos that is in the battlefield, the thunderous sounds. These are very pleasing to Ulysses. He is habituated with these thunderous sounds, these ringing plains of windy Troy. And this setting of a battlefield, that is what suits Ulysses better. And this setting of the battlefield, which he refers to by saying the ringing plains of windy Troy, this is exactly a diametric opposite to the second line of the poem, by the still hearth among these barren crags. These two lines, the second line of the poem and these two are two complete poles, two complete opposites. One is the life of domesticity, which Ulysses hates to live any further, and This the setting of the battlefield, the thunderous ringing plains of windy Troy. This is what Ulysses longs for. These two are two opposite poles, and this too is a contrast that is there in the poem. And again, a very, very, very important line from this poem. I am a part of all that I have met. And Ulysses says that he's a part of everything that he has met. And life, this is Ulysses' philosophy of life. He sees life as an anthology of experiences, as a compilation of experiences and impressions. And that is what Ulysses believes to be life. And this is what was lacking when he was living that life of domesticity, as if trapped in his own kingdom of Ithaca. There was no opportunity for experience in that cragged, in these barren crags of Ithaca. And for Ulysses, he says that that is the philosophy of his life. He says that these experience is what shapes us. These are the experience which makes us what we are, and these experiences are invaluable to Ulysses because it is not his kingship, it is not his political position of the king, it is not his wife, his aged wife Penelope, it is not his son Telemachus, but this vast experience that he has gained all through his life, all through his heroism. This vast experience is what makes Ulysses who he is. So, domesticity contributes to nothing. Idleness and warmth of a cozy fireplace by his wife and son contributes to nothing of Ulysses. This vast experience contributes to what he is. And his life is thus this anthology, this great anthology of experiences. It makes Ulysses who he is. For Ulysses, this also goes both ways. And this line actually can be interpreted in both ways. That Ulysses is a compilation of everything that he has met, and everything that he has met also now bears a part of Ulysses. He had his own influence on them. So Ulysses has affected everyone and everything that he has met. He is such a heroic character, he is such a dynamic personality that whoever and whatever he has met has retained his impression, has been honored to retain his impression. And he is now a part of them. He has left his impression of them, and they too have affected him, and they too have left an impression of him. And to conclude this very important line, I think this actually sums down to the reciprocity of experiences, this reciprocity of life, which he actually wants to mean. But this line again can be interpreted in so many ways. Yet all experience is an arc where through gleams that untraveled world whose margin fades forever and forever when I move. Says all experience, all these experience, a lifetime of experience is just an arc. Its arc is an gateway. It's like a half circle. It's a curved gateway. So all experiences that he has had is just a gateway to that untraveled world, the unexplored world. It is that all of the experiences summed up is just a beginning of the experience. It's just a small fraction of this world full of experiences. And this arc, which is the gateway, is also a symbol that there is opportunity for further quest. Whatever experiences, a lifetime of experiences that you have is just a small fraction of what experience is possible in this world. So this arc, which is the gateway, is an opportunity for unlimited further quest. And when one looks through this arc, when one looks through these gateway, he sees the gleam of that untraveled world. He gleams of that untraveled world, the vision of the untraveled world, and there is this inherent attraction of the unknown. The untraveled world is the unknown which is unknown to the human experience, and whatever is unknown has this inherent attraction. And we know that the unexplored actually seduces human knowledge, it seduces the human mind, and that is the seduction from where the quest actually comes, whose margin fades forever and forever when I move. So, as you know, when you walk with the horizon in sight, the more you move, you see the horizon moving with you, and as if there is no end to that horizon. The horizon never meets. You actually feel like in the horizon, the earth and the sky has met, but that horizon never comes. There is no boundary to that horizon. The further you move, the further the horizon moves. And this is the theme of the endless quest that human beings must pursue in that life, according to Ulysses' philosophy of life, the theme of endless quest. And he says that the boundary or the margin of human knowledge is ever expanding. The more you know, the more you realize is unknown. So there is no end to the quest. How dull it is to pause, to make an end, to rust unburnished, not to shine in use, as though to breathe were life. And he said, it is very dull, so uninteresting to pause and make an end, to pause or stop. The worst part of life is to accept a conclusion, to make an end, to accept that this is the end. That is the worst part, that is the dullest part of Ulysses' life. And it is dull to rust unburnished, not to shine in use. This is a metaphor of the sword that rusts when not in use. If you do not use a sword for very long, there will be rust on the sword. And when a sword, the steel of the sword rusts, the sword will be useless. You can no longer use that sword anymore. And that way, life also ceases to be meaningful when you accept this conclusion, when you accept that there can be no further quest, no further action possible. As though to breathe were life. So, this is just looking down on a life that is merely surviving. So, merely breathing, idling isn't life. Life is not, for Ulysses, life is not merely about surviving. Life is about this endless quest. Life is about war. Life is about heroism. Life is not to accept a conclusion. That is life for Ulysses. To breathe, to merely survive is not life. Life piled on life were all too little, and of one to me little remains. And he says that there is so much that remains unexplored. There is so many opportunity that is still left, that even several lives put together, life piled on life, several lives would still be inadequate to experience everything. So, this is the sheer impossibility of exploring everything, to explore all experiences. And he said, when several lives isn't enough, how do you accept a conclusion when you have just one life? That is too little a time to experience anything. And of one to me, little remains. And he says, of my life, only a small part is left, because As you know, Ulysses is speaking this in a moment where Ulysses is old, and he accepts this old age, and he accepts this mortality, because he knows that very little of his life, his own life, is actually left. So there is very little opportunity left, but still left. But every hour saved is saved from that eternal silence, something more, a bringer of new things. And he says, every hour before death, the eternal silence is death. Every hour before that final conclusion, that final death, will bring new experiences, will bring something more. Something more is possible. New experiences are possible. And this again actually is that line, drink life to the lees. This reflects Ulysses' tremendous zeal for life. He is never giving up. And while it were for some 3 suns to store and hoard myself, and this grey spirit yearning in desire to follow knowledge like a sinking star beyond the utmost bound of human thought. And Ulysses says that it is only vile, it is base, it is below my dignity, it is below anyone's dignity for some 3 suns, for some 3 years maybe. It denotes a very long time, this long that Ulysses, since he has come back from the Trojan War and he is living in Ithaca, it's been too long, 3 suns, 3 years to store and hoard myself. And store and hoard actually refers to that life of the savages, life of the islanders of Ithaca who sleep and hoard themselves and live a life of monotony. These words are again very significant because store and hoard, these are the 2 verbs that we usually use with the non-living things. We do not store people, we do not hoard people. We store and hoard objects, non-living things. And to use these verbs for a person like Ulysses or for any other person, Tennyson wants to mean, or rather Tennyson wants to mean through Ulysses, that this life of inactivity will not even be considered as life. If you are living a life of inactivity and being idle, so you are already without life. You are just a non-living thing that can be stored and hoarded. And this grey spirit yearning in desire. So this grey color, it's a color imagery, and the grey color is usually associated with old age and tiredness. But Ulysses said that his grey spirit is only yearning in desire, and that separates Ulysses from the ordinary. He is not the ordinary. He is beyond the ordinary. He is the heroic. And for Ulysses, this grey spirit, this old age, is about yearning. This old age is about zeal. This old age is about energy and desire. And that separates Ulysses from the ordinary. Follow knowledge like a sinking star beyond the utmost bound of human thought. And he says that this old age, even if this is the old age, I still yearn in desire for the quest and follow knowledge, the pursuit, the quest, like a sinking star. Follow knowledge like a sinking star, like a dying star. So Ulysses knows that this pursuit, this quest in this age, he knows full well that it comes with the threat of death and it comes with the threat of extinction. It's like a sinking star. But he wants to go beyond the utmost bound of human thought. He wants to break the known barriers of the known limits of human knowledge, even in this age, knowing full well that it comes with that threat of extinction. He knows that in this age, the cost of that pursuit, that quest beyond the utmost bound of human thought, the cost of that pursuit is his life, and it comes with the threat of death. It means death, but he still wants to carry on with it. stanza 2, and this, of course, is so different from the first stanza. While Ulysses now talks about his son, now this again refer to the first part of the video where I said that one or more characters may be present but they do not speak. We only know about their presence because the main character, who is the single speaker in the poem, actually talks about these character, refers to this character, and that's how we know that these characters are present. And like the same way we know that Ulysses' son, who is called Telemachus, is actually also present in the setting where Ulysses now is. This is my son, mine own Telemachus, to whom I leave the scepter and the isle. And he says, he introduces his son, Telemachus, and he says that I pass on the power and responsibility to my son. And scepter, as you know, scepter is this stick, is a kind of a staff that the kings hold in their hands. It is a symbol of their power, it's a symbol of the authority. And the isle is, of course, the island of Ithaca, Ulysses' kingdom. So Ulysses says that now I pass the scepter, that is the symbol of power and authority, and the isle, the island of Ithaca, to my son Ulysses. And we understand that this transfer of power, this is a political transfer. This is not a personal transfer. Ulysses, the qualities Ulysses stands for, the strength, the wisdom, the courage, the zeal, the experience, these are what makes Ulysses who he is. This transfer is not a transfer of the qualities that make Ulysses what he is. This is an insignificant political transfer. This is not a personal transfer of qualities. Well loved of me, discerning to fulfill this labor by slow prudence, to make mild a rugged people, and through soft degrees subdue them to the useful and the good. Most blameless is he, centered in the sphere of common duties, decent not to fail in offices of tenderness, and pay meet adoration to my household gods when I am gone. Says, well loved of me. This Telemachus is well loved of me. Ulysses is loved and respected by the whole world. But Telemachus is nothing like that. Telemachus is loved by Ulysses. That's why he says that, well loved of me. While I am most honored of them all, Telemachus, my son, is well loved of me. Telemachus is not honored of them all. Telemachus will not be honored by the whole world like Ulysses. But there is a consolation for Telemachus. Telemachus is loved by Ulysses, who is his father. Discerning to fulfill this labor, and discerning that he is, this Telemachus, he is judicious enough to fulfill, to carry out this labor, these duties of a king, the duties, the common duties of everyday governance, and he is suited for that kind of a labor. By slow prudence, he is going to carry out that labor. Slow prudence means slow, careful thought and judgment that makes you prudish. And prudence is, of course, a very Victorian quality. Victorians were expected to have the quality of prudence. And he will make mild a rugged people through soft degrees. He will make mild, he will civilize the people of the kingdom, rugged people, the uncivilized people who were rugged and uncivilized. These people he will make mild. Telemachus will civilize them through soft degrees and subdue them with mild rules, not extreme measures, which Ulysses stands for. Ulysses stands for extreme measures, while Telemachus stands for mild, soft degrees, mild rules. And he will subdue them, he will orient them and direct them. Telemachus will rationalize these uncivilized population to do the useful and the good, to be useful citizens, to contribute to the nation and society. This, of course, has a different interpretation again, which we'll discuss later. But right now, when we read the poem as a Victorian poem, this is the theme of Victorian utilitarianism. And it is important for a human being in a Victorian world to fit into the society, to be useful to the society. And for the Victorians, to fit into the society, to be useful for the nation and the society, is actually the definition of a civilization. So Telemachus will carry out this process, the civilizing process. And this is one interpretation again. And he will subdue them to do the useful and the good. And what is good according to the Victorians? The only good possible is the growth, prosperity, and industry. So this is the good that Telemachus will make these uncivilized men of. Most blameless is he, centered in the sphere of common duties. He is blameless, he is innocent, and he is naive. And by this line, you realize that Ulysses is not actually praising Telemachus in any way. He is calling him blameless and naive. And he says that he is centered in the sphere of common duties. Telemachus, he is engaged in discharging the everyday duties, everyday ordinary duties of the daily life. And Telemachus is to become Ulysses' mule. He is Ulysses' scapegoat. And he is there, Telemachus is there to do Ulysses' mundane work, while Ulysses go on this exploration and adventure and heroism. And he is decent not to fail. He is sufficient. Telemachus is mediocre. He is satisfactory. He is nothing extraordinary like Ulysses. He is mediocre. He is just okay. And by this time you realize that this is not a praising at all. Rather, coming from Ulysses to his son, this is borderline insult. He said that he's okay, he's decent not to fail. And Ulysses is aware, he is making sure that when we contrast Telemachus with the spirit of Ulysses, Telemachus is just a generational degeneration. He is nowhere near his father. He will never be able to live up to his father. Telemachus is never going to be heroic. He is never going to be a second Ulysses. And it is a very cruel dismissal. Rather, it is a borderline insult, and it is very similar to the aged wife. And we understand that Ulysses, while he deals with his wife and he brushes her off, calling her the aged wife, and Telemachus, he's just saying decent, he's fine, he's decent and blameless and naive. Ulysses actually comes out to be very insensitive about his family. And decent not to fail in offices of tenderness. He is okay for these gentle duties, the lesser duties, while comparing with Ulysses, like taking care of the old queen, his mother Penelope, or governing the kingdom. He is fine for the ruling, the regular laws. He is fine for this domesticity. Telemachus stands for that domesticity. Telemachus stands for this common. He is nothing extraordinary. He is nothing adventure that Ulysses stands for. Both of them stands for very different things. And pay meet adoration to my household gods, and he will pay the due attention and respect the household gods. And these duties, like taking care of the mother, offices of tenderness, regular laws, regular governance, everyday administration, these are a list of secondary importance to Ulysses. It doesn't matter to Ulysses. These are secondary to what he stands for. And because these are lesser works, these are everyday mundane works, he passes them on to his son, Telemachus. He walks his walk, I mine. And this is the final statement, it's a final judgment that Ulysses passes, that there can be no comparison between my son and me, because he is just in his sphere and I am in mine. His work is the ordinary duties of life, and I mine. My work is the quest, the heroic quest beyond the boundaries of human knowledge. This relationship between Telemachus and Ulysses can be interpreted in so many ways. It stands for the two sides of life, two contrasting temperaments, the stark contrast that there is between two generations again. And it can also be interpreted being the symbol for the conservative and the radical extremist. So Ulysses passes this statement that do not confuse us. Just because he is my son, do not think he is Ulysses part 2. He will never be Ulysses part 2. He is just doing his work and I am doing mine. Stanza 3. This is the this stanza, he deals with addressing his mariners, and he tells us about his final desires, what he wants to do right now that he's old and he wants to go out. There lies the port, the vessel puffs her sail. There gloom the dark broad sea, the dark broad seas. And he says, there lies the port, and we also realize the locale, the setting, and we realize that Ulysses is somewhere close to the port, somewhere close to the sea, which is supposed to be because Ithaca is an island. It is covered on all sides by the sea. It is supposed to be covered by the sea on all sides. So there lies the port and the seaport. He's somewhere close to the sea. The vessel puffs her sail, and the vessel is said as the female. The word her is used, and the sail, it's the sail of the sea. The vessel is the ship, and its sail is blowing in the wind, and it's blowing with a dramatic intensity, and it is already ready. I mean, it seems like it is ready for the ride, and it is inviting Ulysses and the other mariners. The vessel is puffing her sail. It's a moment of dramatic intensity that invites Ulysses and his mariners to go on the ride. There gloom the dark broad seas. The dark broad seas, the sea, when it is dark, it becomes unpredictable and dangerous. But this unpredictability of the dark waters of the sea, while it is dangerous for any other person, it is so very attractive to Ulysses because he loves this unpredictability of life. He desires it. My mariners, souls that have toiled and wrought and thought with me, that ever with a frolic welcome took the thunder and the sunshine and opposed free hearts, free foreheads. You and I are old. Old age hath yet his honor and his toil. So this part he's addressing his mariners. He says, my mariners. his fellow sailors, and he addresses them like a leader, like my teammates, my mariners, souls that have toiled and wrought and thought with me. Toiled is labored, wrought is the past of walked, and it also means shaped, because all of them were shaped by common experience, and thought with me, had the same opinion, had the same spirit. Ever with a frolic welcome, these mariners, they ever with a frolic welcome took the thunder and the sunshine. And these mariners, he's reminding them that they have always accepted these adventures with a sportive and lively temper. And the thunder and the sunshine is the difficult and the good times. So, however, the situation was, even if it was difficult and dangerous, and even if it was pleasurable and good, all both of the thunder and the sunshine, my mariners have taken with an open heart, with a sportive lively temper. And it is a reminder of the glorious history. Ulysses is reminding his mariners of the glorious history that they share with him, and he's trying to spur them into action again. Opposed free hearts, free foreheads, and they struggled along, these mariners, freely, fiercely, and free foreheads, without having any doubt that why they are doing this adventure. And there is no reason why Ulysses actually wants to go on with this adventure. It cannot be bound by human reason. This heroic spirit of Ulysses is beyond the boundaries of reason. So, free foreheads, and they have followed Ulysses without doubts. You and I are old. Old age hath yet his honor and his toil. So Ulysses accepts the old age, and he says that you and I are old. I realize, I accept that we are old. But old age hath yet his honor and his toil. But he also identifies the possibilities that this old life could still offer. The old age could still offer honor and toil, and he recognizes this opportunity, he identifies it. Death closes all, but something near the end, some work of noble note may yet be done, not unbecoming men that strove with gods. And he says, death closes all, death ends every opportunity, death is the end of all, but something near the end, something before death can still be done. Work of some noble note, and not anything. Before death, you just don't breathe and call yourself alive. You just do not sleep and eat and store and hoard, be idle, and then call that alive. Before death, every hour that is saved can be used for something heroic, work of some noble note. Something heroic, something noble can still be done. Even there is still even it is very little time that is left. Not unbecoming men that strove with gods. And this is a reference again to Iliad. And Ulysses wants to do something heroic which is not unfit. Unbecoming means unfit or inappropriate for us. And he wants to do something that is beyond the ordinary, because Ulysses and his mariners are not doing things that are ordinary. We have to remember that these are the people, Ulysses and his mariners, they are the people of some stature, and they are the men who clashed with gods. They are not ordinary people. So the things they want to do before death will also not be of any ordinary nature. And this is a reference to Ulysses, because in Ulysses you will see that the Greek and the Trojan gods, they helped both the sides. So Ulysses and his men, they fought both along with the gods and against the gods in the battle of Troy. And again, while he was journeying back home, his ship, Ulysses' ship, was obstructed by the sea god Poseidon, and Ulysses had to clash with this sea god, and he had to fight with this god. And he had a shipwreck, he was deserted on an island, he got separated from half of his mariners. So Ulysses had never given up, although he had strove with the gods. And he reminds his mariners that, remember, we are not ordinary people. We are the men who had once fought with the god and won. So we will do something that suits us, the extraordinary. We'll do something extraordinarily noble and heroic. The lights begin to twinkle from the rocks. The long day wanes. The slow moon climbs. The deep moans round with many voices. And you see Tennyson is using these long words with elongated sounds. The lights begin to twinkle. The long day wanes and the slow moon climbs and the deep moans. These the long words refers to the element and the season of rest. So the long day wanes and the slow moon climbs refers to the declining day which is nearing its end, and we realize that this is the evening, and slowly we realize the whole setting. Ulysses is there one fine evening, he is close to the sea. He has with him his mariners. There is Telemachus whom he introduces to the people, and there is his wife. We understand the setting through the poem. We can imagine the setting in which Ulysses is delivering the speech. It is evening, and this evening also is similar to the lives of Ulysses and his mariners. It is also the evening of their lives. If death could be called the night of life, this is the evening which is nearing the night. So Ulysses and his mariners, their life is nearing death. It is that time of their life and that time of the day. It correlates with one another. The deep moans with many voices. The deep is the sea. It moans with many voices, and it refers to the sound of the sea. This word moans is significant because this is the sea is moaning. The sea is almost sexually inviting. The immense attraction of the sea can be understood by this word moan. It is almost sexually appealing, sexually inviting Ulysses to ride the ship and take its course within the sea. Come, my friends, 'tis not too late to seek a newer world. Push off, and sitting well in order smite the sounding furrows. So it's not too late, it is never too late, not even old age. Because the little time of life that is left in this old age can offer a lot of possibilities. It is never too late. So push off. Now comes the command. Push off. Commence the journey. And sitting well in order. He's asking his mariners to sit well in order within the ship. And again, it refers to the Victorian preoccupation with order and discipline. So all the mariners, they have their own positions, they stick to their positions, they stick to that order, they stick to that discipline, and they sit in that discipline and smite the sounding furrows, strike the waves of the sea, start the ship, start rowing the sea. For my purpose holds to sail beyond the sunset and the baths of all the western stars until I die. Now, after all that heroism, this one word exposes and betrays Ulysses. And this changes the whole poem, this part. He says, do everything because my purpose holds. It is my purpose. It is Ulysses' purpose. All that heroism, all that spur to action, all that philosophy of life that only action and activity is life, inactivity is death. He is the extraordinary, and everyone else is the ordinary. And all that philosophy which he says all through that poem, now he says, my purpose. It is Ulysses's plan, and this one word kind of betrays and exposes Ulysses. He exposes himself by this one word. Again, this is the choice of word that Tennyson does, and this is the third point, that the poet will choose words and expressions that will reveal the character of the protagonist of the dramatic monologue. And Ulysses, after all this, he says, my purpose. And this was never a team. He brushes off the aged wife Penelope. He passes on all that mundane duties to his son Telemachus. He reminds his mariners of all his glorious days. Why? Because everything suits his purpose. The other people doesn't matter. So now we ask the question, is Ulysses truly heroic? Is the poem really about his heroism? Or do we find now that he exposes himself by saying, my purpose, is he obsessively egocentric? Is Ulysses a narcissist? Is he indifferent? And is he escapist who is just escaping from his everyday duties? And all these which he has said, is it his heroism, or are they excuses for all the egocentric and narcissist and indifference and escapism? So these two words badly exposes Ulysses, and now we have doubt that is he truly heroic, because the original Ulysses was of course heroic, but when Tennyson situates Ulysses in a Victorian temper, there must be some hypocrisy that should be in Ulysses, because the Victorian age was also this age of contrast and hypocrisy. So now he exposes himself by saying, my purpose. He is also very selfish. My purpose is to sail beyond the sunset, to sail beyond the horizon, to sail beyond the known, beyond the boundaries of the human knowledge, and sail beyond the baths of all the western stars. And baths of all the western stars, this is a very rich imagery, and it refers to the night sky, because it is evening, the night sky, the evening sky, with its reflection in the waters, in the dark waters. And the moon and the stars, their shadows get reflected in the dark waters, and it looks like the stars of the night sky, the western sky, are taking dips, are bathing in the vast seas. So this is a very rich imagery, while Ulysses becomes ready to commence his journey, and he says, it is my purpose, it is my aim, my desire to sail beyond the seas. It may be that the gulfs will wash us down. It may be we shall touch the happy isles and see the great Achilles whom we knew. So it may be the gulfs which will wash us down. So it may be the hollows of the seas, hollows of the waters which will drown us, because he is ready to accept death, and he understands that such a quest, such an adventure in this part of his life will surely mean a death. So he understands that maybe the water will wash us down, and we will drown, and we will drown. It may be that we shall touch the happy isles. The happy isles is the heaven in Greek mythology, and after we die, maybe we will reach the Greek heaven to see the great Achilles whom we know. And one thing is very significant, that two consecutive statements starts with it may, it may. It may be that the gulfs, it may be that it may be we shall touch. So the two consecutive it may and it may actually refers to the uncertainty that there is in the journey, because Ulysses himself doesn't know what happens in the journey. So it may that the gulfs will wash us down, it may be we shall touch the happy isles. The two it mays, the two consecutive statements starting with it mays, refers to the uncertainty that there is in the journey, and Ulysses loves this uncertainty. And to see the great Achilles whom we knew. Achilles is the hero of Homer's Iliad, as I've said in the beginning of this poem. And he is also the Ulysses' compatriot and friend, and they fought together in the Trojan War, where Achilles was killed. And Ulysses wants to reunite with his friend Achilles after Ulysses' own death. That's what he means, and several critics have pointed out that there is a hint of the autobiographical, the Tennysonian autobiographical here in this part of the poem. We know that Tennyson wrote Ulysses after the death of his very close friend Arthur Henry Hallam, and this is the person for whom Tennyson wrote his greatest ever work, In Memoriam. And this Hallam and Tennyson, they shared a very strong emotional bond, and Hallam's death had tremendous effect on Tennyson. He was shattered and like devastated for so long time after Hallam's death. And maybe through Ulysses' reuniting with Achilles after his death, Tennyson probably desires. So I don't know whether this is intentional. This also may be a subconscious desire, subconscious writing down, which has come through Tennyson's consciousness into this poem. Tennyson also desires a reuniting of himself with Hallam after his death, after Tennyson has lived his life. So there is this hint of the autobiographical, which is not so direct, but several critics have pointed out. Though much is taken, much abides, and though we are not now that strength which in old days moved earth and heaven, that which we are, we are. One equal temper of heroic hearts, made weak by time and fate, but strong in will. So he says, much is taken. He realizes that a greater part of their lives have been spent. They are now just old men. So much is taken, much has gone, much of the youth has passed. But much abides. A significant part of the strength and heroic spirit still remains. And though we are not that strength which in old days, although we are not as strong as we were once in our youth, when we were in the ringing plains of Troy, maybe we are not as strong as in our old days and as in our youth, that moved earth and heaven, that could do the impossible, their heroics, their miracles, which we performed when we were young in our old days. That which we are, we are. So although Ulysses and his men have passed the greater part of their prime, they are now only old. They accept the old age and its decline, but they still consider themselves heroic enough for this present adventure. That which we are, we are. We are still heroic enough for this adventure. Although we are not as strong, in our olden days, we are strong enough for this adventure. One equal temper of heroic hearts. Ulysses and his mariners are equal temper of heroic hearts. It's the collective spirits that Ulysses is trying to spur them into action. made weak by time and fate. Time and fate are the enemies against which Ulysses struggle. Time is the greatest destroyer of strength and beauty. Time ravages everything, and time have taken away their youth, and this is now their fate. This old age is now their fate, but strong in will. But this will of the heart, maybe everything is gone. Their youth is gone, their strength is gone with time, but they are still strong in will. This will of the heart, the will of the heart is something that time can never ravage. The will of the heart is something that time will never destroy. That will is beyond the ravages of time. So they are still strong in will, and that way they will pursue the adventure, the quest, to strive, to seek, to find, and not to yield. To strive is to struggle and aspire, to seek, to find. The quest, it refers to the quest and this exploration, and not to yield, never, never surrender, never stop, and never accept defeat. This is what he concludes his poem with, concludes the dramatic monologue with. So there is nothing, Ulysses says, there is nothing beyond the optimism for Ulysses, this aspiration. There is nothing beyond this optimism and aspiration. There is nothing beyond the human will, nothing beyond the human spirit. So this poem becomes the celebration of the sheer determination of Ulysses. So this is the literal explanation of the poem. Of course, there are many other ways to read the poem, many other interpretations, some of which I have discussed in the 6 lectures of social and intellectual background, which I have uploaded before this. So with that, I end this rather long video, the longest video I have ever made. So that's it. Thank you for bearing with me. Stay safe.